Incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I, am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are on Damn Radio. And I am currently coming to you live from Florida. Feel free to call in tonight should you feel the urge. 573-746-8020. And I will try to keep an eye on the metering devices and everything that comes along there. I'm working on some pretty big and exciting plans. There's been a lot of discussion today about, corruption in Ukraine. So I started last night to tell you about this Jared Kushner thing, and he's the start of the timeline. And what they have done is they're keeping track of these timelines, and it's a long timeline. And so I'm gonna, I shared some of this with you about the end of the war in Ukraine we're all hoping for, that has to come. There was a lot of beating up on which needed to happen on Mitch McConnell. What an idiot he is. Another neocon guy. He's another Lindsey Graham-ish type that loves the war. Tucker Carlson came out with some interesting information I want to share with you about how corrupt the old Z monster has been on there. So I'm going to share with you this little article again. Marco Rubio is talking about the tremendous progress at the talks that were held in Geneva toward aligning Ukraine's position with the U.S. drafted peace plan, which, according to some, has left Kiev's Western backers blindsided. They're really talking about Starmer, Merz, and Macron is who they're really talking about. But Washington and Kiev allegedly are going to continue their discussions, and they did on Monday. I told you about that last night, that Rubio and Driscoll and Witkoff met with Ukrainian officials in Geneva. And what they've been doing, and what I thought I would do first, is excuse me, I had a little bit of a cold tonight. Zakharova said some interesting things about von der Leyen, and we're going to go back from where I was last night and really give you the timeline, because a lot happened on the 24th when we get a walk through all of this. And we started with last night the information about, remember me telling you about the pen being broken, and that was a big deal, and that Kushner was part of the U.S. delegation. And then there was about 4 hours with nothing on the timeline. So 4 whole hours. But then at 4 a.m., and all these times are Greenwich Mean Time. That's and Greenwich runs through England, I think. And but either way, we're in Florida, Greenwich minus what are we, -4, and Missouri's -5. I don't recall, but either way, it's a 4 or 5 hour difference, right? So they talked about, so at 4 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and you're about 5 hours behind if you're listening in Missouri, but Greenwich Mean Time is the important time frame. So U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio departed Switzerland on his way back to Washington at 4 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. U.S. and Ukraine teams were expected to continue technical discussions of the American plan to settle the conflict on Tuesday. And Rubio expressed optimism and said, We're going to get there in a reasonable period of time. Very soon, he said. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that, but we'll see what happens. And then 20 minutes later, there was a joint statement released by Ukraine and American delegations. So the White House issued a joint statement by U.S. So this had to be, in keeping with what was going on with Rubio, headed back to Washington. So while he's on his plane, I guess, the White House issued a joint statement as a result of the talks, describing them as constructive, focused, respectful. And here's some quotes. The discussion showed meaningful progress toward aligning positions, identifying clear next steps, reaffirmed any future agreement has to fully uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and deliver a sustainable and just peace. Sounds like they took this straight from Russian statements, right? The negotiations resulted in the sides drafting a, quote, updated and refined peace framework. The document said that Kiev's delegation reaffirmed its gratitude for the commitment of the U.S. and President Trump for tireless efforts aimed at ending the war. And then the document stressed that Kiev's delegation is going to continue its intensive work on the peace proposal in the coming days. But then later, you get a couple hours later, and now this, and a lot of people have been saying this. I said some of this last night, and I've been saying this for months, as have a lot of others. Washington came up with this peace plan because it believes the situation on the battlefield is not going well for Kiev, and it's not. And that came from RBC Ukraine, citing an informed Ukrainian source. And then Army Secretary Dan Driscoll and the American military officials who visited Kiev last week said that in their estimations, the coming months will be critical for Ukraine, and that within 12 months, they're going to lose Donbass anyway. Now, they're going to lose Donbass anyway. And if they cut aid off from Ukraine, that's going to happen even faster. And they've already lost Zaporizhia. They've already lost Kherson. They've already lost Crimea. Last week, the Defense Ministry of Russia announced that they captured key logistics hubs in Kupiansk and Kharkiv, and thousands of Kiev's troops are encircled in Krasnoarmeysk, Mirnograd, Pokrovsk area, and they're being killed. And I've been watching that, and we've been following it regularly and talking about that. And then this is progressing, and what's really cool is I'm following this timeline that literally every 45 minutes to an hour pumps new information on it, and everything you read, except for the loonies in the deep state sorts of places, like your Mitch McConnells of the world, and your and now Lindsey Graham's been very silent on this. He must have got something else, or maybe his people are pushing him in another directions. But at 7:08 Greenwich Mean Time, 3 a.m. this morning on the 24th, they're saying that the delegations managed to find common ground on most of the provisions of the plan. And they did amend a number of contentious clauses. And that's what Ukraine says. The teams didn't address territorial concessions or its non-accession into NATO, agreeing that that should be done only between Trump and Zelensky. And so the meeting between Trump and Zelensky could take place earlier this week. Well, or this week, I mean, but now it's been pushed to next week because, and we'll get to that further in this timeline, but it's already been pushed. And so a lot has happened. But as it happened, the news was continuing. So, at 8 o'clock this morning, Washington was forcing Kiev. When you see things like this, and you see the movement that is actually going on, and they're keeping track of this. I'm following this timeline through the process. It's literally every hour they're giving you some new news. There's something going on now. They're going to force this because when we get here further down the line and hear about Tucker Carlson and his accusations against Murdoch people that run the news that have been holding a story of corruption for a long time. That was a pretty brutal spot too. But so that continues at 9 o'clock. Rubio assured EU and NATO that their security concerns will be taken into account. That's according to Politico. And both Ukrainian and Western Europeans believe their positions after the meeting in Geneva have actually been strengthened a little bit. Then that Alexander Stubb from Norway, I believe, he says, might be pronounced Stub. He spoke with Zelensky this morning. I welcome the progress made at yesterday's meeting between the U.S. and Ukraine. The negotiations are a step forward, but there are still major issues that need to be resolved. Any decision falling in the remit of NATO in the EU, he said, this is on his X account, that he said, any decision falling in the remit will be discussed and decided by the EU and NATO members. And that's what they're all pushing. They all just want to be part of the deal. And they're not. And but they're trying to be. And I think, here it is. I'm sorry. Yes, it's right here in my notes. He's from Finland. He's not from Norway. And he's the president of Finland. And he said that he talked with Zelensky, and it's crucial that every joint action with our partners is thoroughly thought out together, and we certainly safeguard our shared interests, is what he said. Well, then Dmitry Peskov from Russia, he's a Kremlin spokesman, he said that Russia hasn't received anything official at all about talks between the U.S. and Ukraine in Geneva. They say they only get it when news stories come out, and they don't get anything through official channels. And they complain about that a lot. One of the constant complaints of Russia is that they never get any communication, that everything is done through what they call bullhorn diplomacy, which is you use your media idiots to spout stuff, and not even government real spokespersons that communicate with somebody. And that's what they've been complaining about for a good long time. And Peskov was saying that same thing. And he said, we are aware that some adjustments were made to the text that we had seen earlier, and so we will just have to wait. He said that Russia finds it impossible and unethical to discuss U.S. proposals through the media. Now, I happen to agree with that. I think it's BS. But it's the only way we've been getting information between the parties for at least the last 3 years is only this bullhorn diplomacy. Later, there are no plans for Russia and the U.S. delegation to hold a meeting this week, he said. And no specific information on negotiations as of yet. And Then the Swiss newspaper Le Temps reported that Finnish President Stubb and Italian Prime Minister Meloni have flown out of Washington, and they said that they had spoken with Donald Trump by phone on Sunday to discuss the peace plan. And the Finnish president was described by Le Temps, this newspaper, as Trump's new best friend. And Meloni visited the U.S. Capitol also, and Trump really likes her too, allegedly. So, and then they continued through the day. I'm going to skip through some of these things that they go through, because here's what there were a couple of important things that talked about Donald Trump, that he was not involved in the specifics of the American plan to end the fighting, citing talking about some unnamed, of course, U.S. official. And the official says, if you tell him, I'm going to try to go get a deal, he'll say, great, go see what you can do. And that's the level of detail he has, said the official. The source claimed that there's absolute chaos in the Trump administration when it comes to Ukraine, as even different parts of the White House don't know what is going on. And it's embarrassing. And that was this morning. And then Trump expressed cautious optimism later. And he wrote on his Truth Social, is it really possible that big progress is being made in the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? Don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening, he said. I don't know. And then Zelensky, and it's all over the map today. I'm really sorry about that, but this is all over the map because this is how it's unfolding even as we speak. And there's the latest is still coming out. It's the same timeline. Literally every half hour, 45 minutes, something new comes out. And so Zelensky said he spoke with the Antonio Costa, who's the European Council president, by telephone and briefed him on talks in Geneva. And he said on his X account, I really hate this X diplomacy. It is of great importance that Ukraine is participating in the development of the EU position on settlement on an equal footing. We appreciate the respect, he said on X. Then out comes the lunatic Ursula von der Leyen, also with this Antonio Costa, and the leaders of Germany, Poland, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and several other EU countries are going to hold a meeting on the EU African Union Summit in Angolan capital of Luanda to discuss the developments on Ukraine. So Kaja Kallas and the leaders of the EU were having a meeting earlier today on that to talk specifically about Ukraine because they were all in the same place. And then Mertz jumped on board at about 1 p.m. and said, no peace plan can proceed. Get this. No peace plan can proceed without European consent on issues affecting European interests and sovereignty, is what he said. And there can't be an interim result. Settlement won't happen overnight. Mertz insists that Russia has to come to the negotiating table, arguing that if this is possible, then every effort will have been worthwhile. I don't get how you say that Russia hasn't been very clear about the negotiations, and it's Ukraine that has quit coming to the table every single time. It's not Russia. So then Zelensky comes out again on his X channel. We have to show the Z monster and what he says about 20 minutes after that. And he says that he had a call with the Prime Minister of Norway. We discussed the diplomatic situation and bilateral cooperation. I'm grateful for the advice and support. Norway, as always, is helping. I briefed the minister on the results of the advisor's work in Geneva. Our delegation is now returning home, and I expect a full report this evening on the progress of the talks in Geneva and the principal emphasis of our partners. But the only one they met with was in Geneva anyway, was America. Based on the reports, we will determine the next steps and timing. We will continue coordinating with Europe and other partners around the world. We count on achieving necessary results. And I thank everyone who stands with Ukraine. I mean, all of this is just. I think that Trump is forcing something somehow, but everybody is saying that there's a disconnect, But he wants it done, and so it's hard to tell whether he's really driving the train or whether the train is going somewhere and people are just hopping on board, or if he's forcing this. And I think somebody needs to force it, and I think the finalization has come about with Trump has said, I want this over, and he's pushing people to get it done, however that happens. Then later in the afternoon, the EU put forward its own set of conditions. Ursula von der Leyen said that they had agreed on the main elements necessary for a just and lasting peace and Ukraine's sovereignty, but that Ukraine's borders cannot be changed by force, and no limitations could be placed on Kiev's military. Because remember, they don't like the fact that Russia is going to gain these territories, and they don't like the fact that they're dictating the size of Ukraine's military. And they still are confused about whether that's 400 or 600,000. But remember what Zelensky said last Friday, though. He said, if we don't get through these 28 points, we're going to have a difficult winter anyway. And they're going to have a horrifying winter. And there's a lot of people going to prison in his regime. And Russia's going to advance seriously anyway, and they have been. Just even in the last couple of weeks, it's been more and more. And so then you go back to Moscow, and Ushakov, he told reporters that many points in the American draft by Moscow, or reviewed by Moscow, appear to be acceptable, and that Russia is receiving a signal from Washington to have in-person meetings, but no concrete arrangements have been made yet. Even Chinese President Xi Jinping said that Beijing supports all efforts conducive to peace in the Ukraine conflict, and he spoke with Donald Trump on Monday, and he urged all sides to narrow their differences and reach a peace agreement to resolve the crisis at its roots. Now, this came from a Chinese foreign military press release. So, these are like actual words of Xi Jinping when they put that out. And then we had a discussion about how many points there really were, because the Europeans are having a point about this. And the final number of points in the peace proposal isn't even agreed upon, but the talks are still centered around Washington's original draft rather than separate European versions, is what are going on. Then comes out Kaja Kallas, I don't remember. And she insists that any deal should reflect, the European Union is pushing back, allegedly pushing back. So saying that we reject, we reject that whole issue. We should be discussing how Russia will not invade again, she says, and not what Ukraine should be giving up because there is one victim and one aggressor in this war. And well, you think? I think there's a hell of a lot of aggressors, and all these people, including the Mitch McConnells and the Ursula von der Leyen's and the Kaya Kallases and the Macrons and the Starmers of the world and Lindsey Graham's, people like that, they all want to say that Russia shouldn't be able to get what it wants. Well, why not? The U.S. and the West have been taking exactly what they want the whole time. Wait till we get a little further in here, because when Maria Zakharova, she about comes unglued on him in her press conference earlier today, which was pretty funny. I listened to it, and it was a short. It wasn't her full 2.5 hour one that she does once a week, but it was out there. So then came out a story. Who wrote that one? U.S. media says that U.S. peace plan proposes that Ukraine basically give up its sovereignty, and the European backers are trying to rewrite this proposal, according to CNN. And a pause along the current front lines would look tempting for Ukraine, but Russia won't agree to just a pause. They'll just keep on fighting if that's the case. And winter's coming. So I think that needs to be paid attention to. Then there was a Ukraine court sentenced an exiled Zelensky critic to 15 years in jail while he's gone. And his name is Anatoly Shary, has claimed that officials in the Zelensky's office considered accusing servant to the people parliamentary faction head David Arakhamia of treason in order to deflect attention from the corruption scandal consuming the government on the day the under fire Ukrainian leader met his party's MPs, which was last week. Arakhamia has been among lawmakers that's been urging Zelensky to dismiss Andrei Yermak. And Andrei Yermak is corrupt as hell, arguing that he could be linked to the recently exposed energy sector graft scheme, and but Zelensky refuses to fire him. And Shary wrote on Telegram that internal discussions about the November 20 meeting allegedly ranged from jailing more investigators to silencing witnesses, but argued that this won't stop NABU from eventually reaching senior officials. And everybody seems to think that's going to be Yermak. It's going to be Zelensky himself. And so this corruption scandal is going to just continue. And so all day today we heard those things. And then steps in the Baltic leaders, and they're urging, of course, tougher pressure on Moscow. So Estonian Prime Minister Christian Mikkel called for the immediate use. They want this money, Russia's money, this 300 billion in assets. And they don't like that the U.S., through the Trump administration, is taking most of it. And then there's a show called The Sanchez Effect, and there's a guy named Pepe Escobar who I like listening to. You ever get a chance to listen to Pepe Escobar on YouTube, just go look him up. Pepe, P-E-P-E, Escobar. And he was on a show called The Sanchez Effect. And he says that in order to get the deal to get passed, they have to rewrite 80% of the deal just to make it work. And he said that this deal should be seen only as the first stage of a possible peace plan, but they got to rewrite 80% of it. And because the package in its current form is going to be unacceptable to Moscow anyway. And host Rick Sanchez discussed the major graft scandal that came out in Ukraine this month and all of that. But Escobar points to a lack of coverage of the scandal in the EU and, well, America too. Not enough people are covering the stolen money, not enough of it. And this money is very important. You don't need a single line in European mainstream media about the NABU investigation. There's total silence, he said. And he claimed this is because the officials fear the probe will track back eventually to Brussels and the European Commission and America. I say, he didn't say America. I say America. I think it's going to get back there too. And then, at about also Greenwich Mean Time, 6 p.m. our time, Thomson Reuters published details of the European proposal that is now the alternative drawn up by the UK, the France, and Germany, with two approaches diverging on territory, NATO membership, fate of frozen Russian assets. So the European copy seen by Reuters halts the fighting along current front lines and pushes discussions. And so we're right back to the same old ceasefire versus a resolution of the entire conflict. All we are is ceasefire. That's what everybody is trying to, well, except the Russians. This is what everybody's trying to get to. But both drafts reportedly envisage Washington receiving the money to provide these security guarantees, but they don't agree to how much the sum is. The Telegraph said that European plan drops the clause that would have given 50% of the future profits from frozen Russian assets invested in Ukraine to the U.S. And Moscow describes this draft as a potential basis for agreement, but has dismissed the European version as completely unconstructive. They don't like each other. Spain stepped in a little bit later, nothing important there. And then Carolyn Leavitt said, Trump is optimistic that a deal will be struck by the end of the week. U.S. have a couple of points of disagreement concerning the draft proposal. Then Zelensky claims that Europe has incorporated correct points, but sensitive issues have to be discussed between him and Trump. And as of now, after Geneva, there are fewer points, no longer 28, and many correct elements have been incorporated into this framework, he said in his own little video address. So at about 9 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, where would that put us? About 5 p.m. our time, J.D. Vance jumps on board. This is where he slammed Mitch McConnell, because Mitch McConnell sent out, it looks like it's on X, it says, here's Mitch McConnell. Putin has spent the entire year trying to play President Trump for a fool. If administration officials are more concerned with appeasing Putin than securing real peace, then the president ought to find new advisors. Well, I think he needs to find new advisors that'll talk reality, because that hasn't been happening. Old Mitch, that hasn't been there. And then a guy named Greg Price says, after being hilariously and pathetically wrong in his prediction that Trump would lose the 2024 election, McConnell has now spent all of 2025 doing nothing but working to undermine the MAGA agenda at every turn. He voted against several members of the cabinet even. And then J.D. Vance jumps in and says, where is J.D. Vance? I want to read the whole thing. And so I'm going to go to X and pull that up. J.D. Vance says, this is a ridiculous attack on the president's team, which has worked tirelessly to clean up the mess in Ukraine that Mitch, always eager to write blank checks to Biden's foreign policy, left us. I wonder if the three candidates to replace Mitch McConnell in Kentucky share his views here. I do like that Vance comes out and tells it pretty much like it is. I do like it when he does, and he's a good dude to listen to in that regard. And so I'm starting to lean toward him. I always liked him anyway. And then here, Carolyn Leavitt says, no meeting. This is when she said there's no meeting between Trump and Zelensky going to be planned this week. And here is where Maria Zakharova came up. And this came out at about 10 p.m. This is about 4 hours ago. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova shot back at Ursula von der Leyen. I told you about what she said later, saying that the EU chief couldn't have failed to hear about Kosovo, arguing that it was the West that by force implemented a unilateral redrawing of Serbia's borders. And so the question is here, her remarks came in response to von der Leyen criticizing the reported U.S. peace plan, parts of which recognize Crimea, Donetsk, and Lugansk as Russian. And on the question of Ukraine's future amount of forces, Zakharova gave another punch in the face to Ursula. So Ursula denying a sovereign state the opportunity to side on its own armed forces. She cited another line from von der Leyen. The EU's central role in ensuring peace for Ukraine has to be reflected. And Zakharova questioned that and asked, since when had the EU been ensuring peace in Ukraine anyway? And she wanted to know who in Brussels is responsible for this and on what basis. And she pointed to the 2013 and 2014 crisis again, arguing that Viktor Yanukovych, president of Ukraine then, had legitimately suspended the EU integration deal because the Ukrainian economy and legislation were not ready, and accused the West of provoking another Maidan that resulted in the 2014 change of power. And I want to still point to the Venezuela thing, because that's the same thing that's going on there. Is we're going to destroy them and force regime change there too. So then, a guy named Alexei Goncharenko, who's an opposition leader, says that Zelensky has declined an offer to meet Trump in Washington this week. And according to Goncharenko, Zelensky cited the need to prepare a detailed plan and consult with European leaders before that trip. And he said that Zelensky would likely arrive in the U.S. next week. So there are a butt ton of things going on in the world. I wanted to go and find out, and I'm wondering if it is finished as of yet, and I don't think it is, because I want to go and hear what Ukrainians are saying about this, and especially that guy Arestovich, who I listen to pretty frequently, and he has a couple-hour show that comes up every every couple of weeks, And darn it, no, I've screwed up. Hang on a second. We're gonna dig that back up because I haven't been able to. But Arestovich gave a big show today, and I was only able to listen to half of it. And I wanted to hear what the thoughts are. And then the title of his show is Arestovich, and he was citing what Zelensky allegedly is receiving and what Ukrainians think of it. And so I'm gonna chat on that regard too. And then I had one other topic that I wanted to cover. We'll get back to that in just a minute on the after I see it doesn't look like I have, and I wanted to show just the latest of the Washington Post came out. Actually, you know what? I forgot to tell you about Kurt Volker. Do you guys remember Kurt Volker? So Kurt Volker was the U.S. envoy for Ukraine during Trump's first term. Okay. And he, of course, is arguing that the president shouldn't abandon Ukraine or the peace process. And he's saying, and he told CNN this. So Volker, I never really cared for way back then because I always thought he was, he's certainly part of alleged deep state, in my view. And here's his quote what he told CNN. This is going to be an embarrassment for Trump on the scale of the embarrassment for Joe Biden from walking away from Afghanistan, he told CNN on Monday. So he's thinking that if this goes the way that Trump is pushing this now, that it's an embarrassment to him because Ukraine is losing. But Ukraine's going to lose anyway. I mean, what is he suggesting? What are all of these idiots from Europe, from the deep state, from the Mitch McConnell's and Lindsey Graham folks, your deep staters? What are they suggesting? I mean, seriously, are they suggesting that we do what Europe is doing? And have a buildup and create more war between Russia. Russia stood up, and Russia forced the issue, and Russia's been saying the same thing forever. Stop expanding. One of the 28 points is no more NATO expansion. No more NATO expansion. Put it on paper somewhere. All the crap that George Bush won told Russia, we won't expand another inch to the east. Whatever happened to that? We didn't follow it, not at all. And so here is the very, very latest. This is the first one from the 25th of November, Greenwich Mean Time. This came out about a half an hour ago. Says the Washington Post had cited an unnamed EU diplomat as saying that the issue right now is that we don't really have a clear picture of what is being negotiated between the U.S. and Ukraine. The diplomat added that there's a sense of mystery around the current phase of negotiations, and the EU leaders are being met for the moment with some rejections from Americans when they try to join the talks. Isn't that nuts? And it's it's amazing to me where they're all going with this. And the very latest is the very latest that they've come up with on these talks. and because it shows the live updates that we're almost there on settlement with Ukraine. That's according to the Trump envoy, who has said this, that we're almost there. And who else? Moscow comments on the status of the plan. That was Peskov, and all of these things where we have them. Or where we have the discussions on it. It's been an entertaining day, to say the least, as far as the news is going. And so now I wanted to go back to Arestovich and get to his main points of what he is saying, whether or if anything has been achieved from the Ukrainian side. I think that is a very important part, because I want to talk about his commentary. And according to him, Zelensky hasn't won anything, much of anything, in Geneva. Here's what he says that this still looks like. And I think it's important. When I was listening to him, I think this is important for everybody to realize. We're right back to Istanbul 2022 with these things. Okay, so Russia, if you recall this, when the escalations, if you want to call them that, occurred in 2022, was very quick. February 24, 2022, Russia begins to support the Donbass specifically. And then in April of that year, Russia had taken over a good portion. In fact, part of even Kiev, they had gone in and they took some large areas, large portions of territory. And when they did, Kiev came to the bargaining table. And they did that in Istanbul, okay? And so there they were in Istanbul going through all this in April, and they had met several times to resolve this. This was going to be resolved. And Boris Johnson and company and all of the West deep staters convinced Ukraine to keep fighting. They convinced Ukraine that Russia's just going to collapse, and this is what we've believed about Russia for 30 years. And so they had a deal that was actually drafted and a couple of initials put on it that was already being circulated between Ukraine and the Kremlin. And according to Arestovich, Zelensky hasn't won much of anything in Geneva, and that the plan is still Istanbul 2022 in disguise. That Geneva hasn't changed the core of the what the agreement. It's the same logic, the same limits on Ukrainian armed forces, the same territorial setup. All they've done is rebrand it and tweaked the wording. The same thing that Russia's been talking about before. Because think about this. Ukraine has lost 1 million men since 2022. And what have they gained for it? What has happened? If anything, they've lost more. And so here you are with Istanbul 2022 in disguise, according to Arestovich. And that is crazy stuff. And then he has these, there are some cosmetic edits to this deal, but this is not a new deal at all. And so he says that Kiev's team managed to rework a few individual points, mainly this amnesty language. He's saying that everybody's getting their amnesty for all the theft that's gone on of all the money. And this is inside of Ukraine that they are saying this, that they're getting the amnesty language. They want to focus on they're still victims, that they get to claim they're the victims of all of this. They want to reset some of the timing of this, and they want to chat about the details on the frozen Russian assets and how Ukraine might want to keep them, and elections and timing of elections, but nothing that changes the strategy. And basically, Zelensky has failed since he first came over in February to kill Trump's peace plan, right? He has, but nothing has changed the strategic essence of the deal ever since Istanbul 2022. And so part of the trip was meant to derail Trump's finish this quickly plan, and instead, Trump still has the initiative and will now, at least according to Arestovich, increase pressure on both Russia and Ukraine. I heard something interesting from another pundit the other day. Well, it was actually today, that what he said is that the U.S. will begin to sanction Ukraine in addition to sanctioning Russia at the end of this. And that's the second or third time I've heard people say that is what's going to happen. But after all of this, after everything that I hear, and I've given you everything where we are up to date, and now I'm going to give you my commentary for what I think is going to happen, because I don't think this is going to resolve the war at all. I think they're too far apart. I think that the core needs of a deal from the point of view of Russia have not been met, not remotely. And so I don't believe that this is going to get anywhere. I think we're going to see some further escalation instead of resolution, is what I think. And so there have been some, I believe this should be a little bit of a reality check, right? There are 3 dead illusions according to Arestovich, and I don't say I agree with all these, but what he said is, number 1, the war can end fast. Putin will just accept a just Ukrainian vision, or the conflict can be wrapped up at all on Kiev's terms. And these are, he called this the broken pen moment. Remember I told you about Umarov and the broken pen in that meeting that I was telling you about last night inside of Geneva. None of these are going to be anything except a harsh reality check. The U.S., according to Arestovich, laid out a real battlefield data that undercut Kiev's propaganda narrative of the impending Russian collapse and exposed how bad the manpower and frontline situations really are. And because nobody believes that Ukraine can win this war any longer. I mean, if they ever really did, I've never really did. And I've been saying it since day one that it's not going to happen. But everybody has been pumping it. Even the people surrounded in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd right now, which have been said to be between 5 and 10,000. That was several weeks ago. There's far fewer now. And I think that those um, encircled guys, half of them have been killed. And there have been some attempts by Sierski to go and create some sort of counteroffensive on the Ukrainian side. And they've been pumping it all because they wanted to go to Geneva and say, oh, no, 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 we're winning. We're winning. All for propaganda, all for political purposes. They've tried really hard to push that narrative, but that doesn't stop the reality from occurring. And so the reality check from the Americans are that, look, we already know how bad this situation is. Quit trying to pump this propaganda to us. Arestovich said that actually happened in Geneva, that they have put it out. And he says that, and get this, I found this extremely interesting. According to Arestovich, he says that the U.S. officials inside of Geneva at the meeting, that they confronted the Kiev officials over Western armaments being sold to Africa, Gaza, Hezbollah, Latin American cartels, and everywhere else, and that this this Ukrainian corruption goes to more than just money. They're taking the equipment and reselling it to third parties. So the equipment comes in, they turn around and resell it. And this is a Ukrainian saying this. This is Arestovich saying, look, the U.S. has confronted them with this uncomfortable truth about Western arms showing up in Africa, Gaza, Hezbollah, Latin America. This is a serious blow to Ukraine's political position and its moral position. This is bad news. And so what he says the West is trying to do now, especially Trump, is divide the money and control and not help Kiev win, because Kiev isn't trying to help itself win. It's so corrupt that they cannot. And in his view, the debate over frozen Russian assets, who manages them, and under what conditions they get released, is a U.S. EU fight over cash and leverage, with Ukraine as an excuse, not a beneficiary. So, according to Arestovich, what's the bottom line? Zelensky left Geneva with with basically the same thing he could have had in Istanbul in 2022. But now instead of having Boris Johnson say, keep on, we'll keep pumping money in for the last, and you just fight to the last Ukrainian, and we'll make you all very rich. Now they're starting to get some external pressure. The weakness has been exposed. There are fewer illusions. And he doesn't believe there's any big diplomatic victory coming here on any of this, which I frankly I find to be somewhat true as well. So I wanted to get to, and I think that's enough of the Ukraine and the peace deal, but that's been all that's in the news internationally so far on that in the past day. Let's see. Where else did they have? There was another effort to derail a train inside of Russia. Where is that article I wanted to share with you about Brazil and all of the what Lula was it Lula or oh, did you hear about this? The judge has thrown out the case against Russiagate FBI chief. The court dismissed the indictment against James Comey just recently. And this sounds, I mean, I went and downloaded the agreement or the order and everything. But the U.S. federal judge dismissed the cases against FBI Director Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, ruling the prosecutor that oversaw the indictments was appointed unlawfully. Judge Cameron McGowan Curie wrote in her order that the installation of Trump's former lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, as the interim attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid, and that all actions flowing from her defective appointment, including securing and signing Mr. Comey's indictment, were an unlawful exercise of executive power and must be set aside. So this is the scam of the planet. I'm grateful. Here's Comey. I'm grateful the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence. Yeah. Well, what was the one that you were imposing, or all of you were imposing against Trump? Same thing. And of course, they'll all get away with it. It always is that way. So I've had some discussions about this in the past, and I say this fairly frequently, and I believe it to be true. The judicial branch of government is probably, you want to talk about deep state, that's where you should go and look at first. Okay, that is where reform needs to happen. Okay, I've been wanting to talk about a couple of pathways that I've created with some assistance, some very serious assistance, and getting into government overreach a lot. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to come out with something pretty powerful in this regard pretty soon. That we'll be able to announce this project that we have put together that will go after government overreach, but it will never happen in America. And all the positive people, and I know a lot of them, and I hear a lot of positive talk from a lot of people even on this station that are talking about changes that are going to happen, and I'm always a bit more pessimistic about that. And the reason I am is because the biggest problem is the one that you can't get rid of. And that is the corruption of the judicial branches of government. These people are appointed for life. They cannot be taken care of. And it's always one hand washes the other. They protect people like this. When this judge is writing about this lady or this defective appointment of appointing a lawyer for the Eastern District because she had a job before in the Trump administration, I guarantee you there are plenty of people that attacked Trump who were in the Clinton White House or in the or had been worked closely with the Clintons, and I guarantee you they weren't defective appointments, or this lady wouldn't have ruled the same against them. I've had this theory for a long time, and unfortunately, I don't believe it's theory. I think it's the absolute truth. I think that when cases, let's talk about this Comey case when it comes to this judge. Okay, and I'm only using this as an example because this is the case. So the case gets filed, an indictment gets filed, and the case is a criminal charge. And and it ends up in front of this Judge Curie. And I don't know this Judge Curie, I don't know anything about her. And I'm only using this as an example. But what I believe is that judges do not do what they teach you in law school. I don't believe, people want to believe, I want to believe that judges follow the law. That isn't how it works. That is not how it works. In reality, it works that a judge looks at the case and doesn't go, oh, gee, I don't know anything about this. What they know are the people. What they know are the issue. And they decide who they wish to win. That's what they do. And then they find the law that supports that position. The exact same as a lawyer does, the exact same as a lawyer is trained in law school. They don't follow the law. They create the law based on whatever they justify their position by picking and choosing, cherry picking little points from the law. So is that following the law? Arguably, I suppose it is. But don't tell me that the judge is completely unbiased. Certainly, a biased judge will always be able to find a proposition that supports his or her position that they end up taking. It's just how it works. And when I read this, it's exactly what I read. Now, and having practiced law, you sometimes go and read these judgments that are just, how is it that if everyone is following the law, how is it that 7 appeals court judges or 9 Supreme Court justices have different opinions? If you're following the law, everybody should always come up with the same answer, right? If you're following the law, what does it matter what the political bent is of a judge that gets appointed to the Supreme Court? It shouldn't matter if everybody is following the law. So what I'm saying is a proposition that people don't believe the judges follow the law anyway. They believe the judges create the law, and so all this is a biased judge potentially interpreting something potentially that if it was the exact same thing in reverse with Trump being indicted, we saw what happened to him. If all of those judges were following the law, maybe they should have thrown out the allegations against him. Maybe that should have occurred. So I don't know. I think it needs to be followed further. That Trump has long accused Comey and James of participating in what he described as a politically motivated witch hunt, right? He argued that Comey spearheaded the Russiagate hoax. Now, I think he did. And so where will anybody ever get any justice for Russiagate? It'll never happen. It'll never happen. This Russia is still going on today. And James unfairly prosecuted the Trump organization for fraud. So in September, a grand jury indicted Comey for making false statements during a 2020 Senate hearing about the investigation into Russian interference. And we all know he did. Everybody knows he did. Although the investigation found no collusion of any type between Trump and Moscow, Comey defended the probe into Trump as appropriate and essential. And in October, a federal grand jury indicted Letitia James for mortgage fraud. According to CNN, the ruling makes it possible to bring the same charges against Comey and James in the future. The White House said following the verdict that the facts of the indictment against Comey and James have not changed, and this will not be the final word on the matter. Now, Halligan was legally appointed, and that's the administration's position. But this is nonsense. I wanted to get to this Zelensky and Tucker Carlson, what he had said. So the Wall Street Journal is refusing to publish information allegedly proving that Ukrainian leader Zelensky's top aide embezzled U.S. money. In a post on X on Monday, Carlson said the Wall Street Journal has for months. Here, I'm going to read the whole thing to you. Where is it? Here's Tucker Carlson's post. For months, the Wall Street Journal has held a story detailing the personal corruption of Andrei Yermak, the second most powerful man in Ukraine. Yermak has skimmed hundreds of millions in American taxpayer dollars meant for Ukraine aid. The journal's editors can prove that, but they're not. Instead, they're protecting Yermak. Why? Because Yermak is leading Ukraine's efforts to scuttle the Trump peace plan for Eastern Europe. The owner of the Wall Street Journal doesn't want peace with Russia. They want war. At the same time, the journal's editorial page attacks Trump administration for pushing a peace agreement. This is true corruption. Without informing its readers, the Murdoch family is using both sides of its newspaper to continue the war with Russia. That is not the behavior of a news organization. It's the hallmark of an intel agency. Hard to disagree with him there, isn't it? And but that's the whole article. He argued, let's see, earlier this month, they point out, but the $100 million kickback scheme, but they did get rid of Mindick. You know what I heard earlier today as well was that Tamir Mindick, since he's Jewish and he ran off to Israel, he cannot be extradited. A Jew cannot be extradited from Israel for anything. So if they can get there, they can stay there, basically. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's exactly what Zelensky's going to do. Zelensky's Jewish as well. And he's going to do the exact same thing. And so he put his empty sanctions on Mindick, who fled the country to evade arrest and go. And although Yermak has never been formally charged, a Ukrainian opposition lawmaker, Yaroslav Zelensky, alleged that Yermak was well aware of the embezzlement and appeared in audio recordings released by investigators. The newspaper Ukrainskaya Pravda reported on Monday that Yermak had instructed prosecutors to draw up charges against NABU chief Alexander Klimenko, and Zelensky attempted to curb the powers of NABU and SAPO in July, but was forced to retreat after pressure from the West, and with Yermak, both of them. So it's tell you what, I think the corruption is not going to go away. They're still gonna have that excuse me, that issue to react to, and I also think that that's what's going to bring down the Ukraine, the swamp of corruption that they talk about, and it's continual that they're everything is so corrupt over there that there is no way that anything new is going to come of this, and that this, I think that the reality of this is the war will continue, because Russia will not accept the plan proposed. That's what I think, especially after all these changes that are coming out. And so we're in the same spot we were in January, the same spot we were in February and March, same spot we were after the meeting in Alaska. Remember, the 21st, we were supposed to have all of these heavy-duty sanctions kick in, against everyone. 90 days is up, and here we are. And there's nothing new to go on there. So, tell you what, it's this war is going to just continue. Ukraine is drowning in corruption. They're drowning on the battlefield. And all they're trying to do is continue to milk it, milk the money into this for them, and for the Ukrainians to continue to get rich off of this. I wanted to talk about something a little less dramatic in here, if any of you follow these types of things. So if we're going to talk about something positive, remember my stories or my shows in the past several months that talk about the infrastructure that is going on in the global south, and especially in the Asian continent, the southern parts of the Asian continent, all the stands where Georgia is, all of that, Azerbaijan, and all of those areas, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the China, India, Russia, India, China, Rick, that I've talked about before. Well, there's two major areas where this they've done some of the land logistics, crossing over the land. And another one that is being talked to is a Caspian Sea to Black Sea canal. Now, that would be freaking enormous if that ever took place. And so the Black Sea, Turkey's on the south. You have Ukraine with Odessa, and Russia with the Crimea, Russia in the east, Sevastopol, and a couple other places over there. Large fleet, Russian Navy is there. And it's been Navy in Russia for a very long time in that area. And so, but all of these landlocked places, including the Caspian Sea, there's no real way to get your product. If you have a port on the Caspian Sea, you can't get anywhere with it. You can't get to the Mediterranean. You can't get to the Black Sea. And so, well, except by land, rail. And there is discussion about creating another project, an infrastructure project, a pretty damn big one, to create. So there are several existing routes. Oops, where did I go with that? There's several existing routes over land. But if you look at it on a map, what the basics are is that there is no direct sea level canal that connects the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea. And so the existing shipping routes is the Volga-Don Canal system, which uses rivers and artificial waterways to link the two seas indirectly. But a direct route has been proposed, a Eurasia Canal, which is under consideration. And so the primary existing canal or connection between the Caspian Sea is the Volga-Don Canal. It's 101 kilometers, 63 miles or so long, part of the unified deep water system of European Russia. So the route right now, ships can travel up the Volga River from the Caspian Sea to the canal starting point near Volgograd, and they transit the canal to the Don River and then go downstream to the Sea of Azov. And finally, they pass through the Kerch Strait into the Black Sea. So this route is very long. It's about 3,500 kilometers and has a number of locks, 13 of them, and to manage significant elevation changes. So the Caspian Sea is a basin with surface elevation 28 meters below the Black Sea. So it's limited to smaller river sea vessels with a maximum length of 140 meters, a draft of 3.5 meters, and it doesn't accommodate any large ocean-going ship, container vessel, anything like that. So the proposed waterway through the Eurasian Canal is a proposed project, which they're saying would be $20 billion. It's known as the Managed Shipping Canal. It envisions a more direct and wider canal along the Kuma-Managed Depression, a natural geology depression that separates the Russian plain from the North Caucasus. And the proposed route would be 700 kilometers, about 430 miles long, following a chain of lakes and existing shallow irrigation canals. If it is built, it would provide a much shorter shipping route than the Volga-Don system, and it would accommodate larger vessels up to 10,000 tons. And so it is a proposal that has, significant political, economic, and environmental challenges, and with some concerns, economic impact, economic viability. They need to hire traffic, but they have been speaking about it frequently on this, and for centuries, canals have done this. You remember me doing a show on the Russia America Bering Strait deal not too long ago. Right now, this proposal, the Eurasian one, it is backed by Russia, Kazakhstan, and China. This $20 billion project gives landlocked Central Asia a gateway to the world's ocean. And if it is built, it wouldn't be just another canal. It would be a new maritime corridor with the power to shift trade routes and political influence. And it has immense, this whole area, since there's such a huge area for oil, natural gas, grain, and everybody in that area rely on these resources, and they got to do something. Remember, my argument is that creating infrastructure creates your future. This is, and it defeats politics because you have the infrastructure. Whatever your politics are, you're going to be a part of this infrastructure if you do it. So, because every shipment of grain, steel, or oil has to go through these countries to hit a global market. And the only maritime route available today is the Volga-Don Canal, and it was built in 1952, and it's not deep enough. They can do 5,000 tons. Traffic is slow, it's seasonal, it's regulated, and it's a bottleneck, And Kazakhstan has long been constrained by this because Kazakhstan has tons of resources, but can't necessarily get things out to the world market because of dependency on um, shipping and dependency on all of this. And it's one of the world's largest or top grain producers, but it can't export without negotiating access through other countries. And so it has abundant resources, but no access, no deep water route. So when Kazakhstan became independent in 91, it found itself without any land. It's got, I'm sorry, it has without any, since they're landlocked, they have no way to get out of there. They have energy wealth. They have just no coastline, so they can't get anywhere. And Nursultan Nazarbayev, president, thought that this lack of direct access to global shipping is holding them back. And, this proposal has been coming along for a while. And the proposal does align the interests of Russia, Kazakhstan, and China. And China could secure yet another Western corridor for trade because remember, they're looking for all kinds of alternate methods to get to the European markets and get their goods out. And this is the reason I give this to you is because of all the BRICS discussions that we have on this channel as well. When we talk about this, ships could pass all the way through to Turkey if they build this. So if you go from Caspian Sea to Black Sea or Caspian Sea to Sea of Azov and then to the Black Sea, they could get out to the Mediterranean and into global markets much quicker, much easier. And for these inland economies in Central Asia, it would help transform them, and it would turn closed sea and maritime trade hubs and get them availability to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So this is a scale. They're saying it would cost about $20 billion to get it done. And the challenge, it exists, but if these three get together and they do it, the biggest challenge isn't the engineering, it's the funding. Since it's 20 billion, it has an enormous financial and political risk. Russia is interested, but under sanctions, they might have some problems. Kazakhstan supports it, but can't fund it alone. China is the most likely investor, and given its experience with mega projects, this could be a big success story for them, I say. So keep your eye out for that. We may be talking about that some more in the very near future, don't you think? I think we might want to talk about it some more. That could be quite a development. So they have to get, and gas is also increasingly moved by pipeline, but they could do a companion since they're digging it all. They could have a gas route going through there. And so diverting rivers and all of that, those are big issues. And so, but if it is built, the Eurasia Canal could stand alongside the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, is one of the great waterways of history, and it reshape trade networks, redefine regional power. And, right now it's still just an idea, but it looks like they are getting closer. My name is Samuel Trapp. You have been listening to International Flavor. I'm very glad you have been here, and I hope you join me every night on damradio.com/live, 9 p.m., 10:30 Missouri time, or listen to my shows anytime at internationalflavor.com, where they're all recorded and saved. Have a very good night.